Okay, we're going to get you a first-hand account of this crisis. Joining us now is Toren Ballard. He's a resident of Jackson, Mississippi. Toren, thanks for joining us live. I hope you had a chance to hear that story. It really portrayed a pretty grim picture. I've been reporting down in that area of Mississippi for close to 30 years, and it has a long history of poor governorship, as they mentioned, racism and neglect. What would you say the situation is there now?
So the situation now is that certain neighborhoods across the city, the water is still unsafe to drink. However, the citywide boil water notice that was put into effect around Christmas was finally lifted a few weeks ago. So most neighborhoods in the city can currently drink their water. My house included. I've been drinking a lot of water today, actually. Although I should mention, there still are concerns over the level of lead in water systems here in Jackson.
Yeah, and let's pick up the issue of lead, because any amount of lead is bad. And when you have a community that is 83% African American, it's easy for people there to be very concerned, say, look, why does it always happen in a community like this? Tell us where you think the problem started and really how it all began. Sure.
I mean, there's multiple levels to it. You know, on the statewide level, there's been huge disinvestment in the city of Jackson. State leaders, I think, need to do a lot more in terms of directing the amount of money that we need to fix some of these longstanding infrastructure issues. There have been some management issues here at the local level as well, but I think overall it stems from a chronic disinvestment in the city of Jackson, which has a very long history, and the legacy of racism is certainly a part of this.
Let's pick up on that. Do you think that that is a significant part? Because it is going to be impossible to tell so many people who have suffered for so long down there, despite 2 years of efforts to try to make the water drinkable. They're still running into problems time after time after time. You mentioned that when it got really cold over the holidays, when pipes froze and people had to go without water for some time, and it took a long time for it to go back on. So tell me about your concerns, and do you believe this is really racially motivated to a large degree?
Well, race definitely plays a role. Let me put it this way. If Jackson was a majority white city, I don't think that we would be dealing with these chronic disinvestment issues at the state level. There actually are plenty of predominantly white municipalities around the state of Mississippi that receive a lot more on, a per person basis in terms of funding. And there's been a lot more efforts to fix some of those water issues. Obviously in Jackson, it's much more expensive. It's a bigger city. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think if Jackson was a predominantly white city, this would probably be a different conversation at the state level here.
And it's also the seat of power within that state. And Mississippi was set to receive millions of dollars to help in infrastructure. But now the EPA is investigating misappropriation of federal funds. Tell me to what degree residents there are concerned about that, and what is the status, and are they concerned with this $800 million now freed up to assist this situation? It's going to be the same old, same old.
Well, I think there's always going to be concerns about corruption and misspending in many states, but especially Mississippi. We've been dealing with a lot of issues with federal funds being diverted to purposes they are perhaps not intended towards. However, I do think with the amount of attention that is being put on the water crisis here in Jackson, I do have a little more confidence in the new batch of funding that Congress appropriated last month. I believe it was about $600 million. I do have a little more faith now that the magnifying glass really is on this crisis. I think that the Justice Department under the Biden administration is really taking this issue seriously, and we can see that by the fact that they appointed this third-party manager back in November. And so the federal government really is taking a big interest in the city of Jackson, and I think that bodes well for where the money gets spent and how it gets spent. I think the more attention that gets paid towards these issues, the better.
Toren, also, look, let's make it clear, Jackson is not alone. There's Flint, Michigan, and a number of other cities out there as well suffering from water contamination and the concerns about that. We've had these crises. Are there going to be improvements? You did talk about, yes, there is this hope out there, but as you mentioned, people outside the borders of Mississippi, outside the borders of states, outside the United States now know the names Jackson, Mississippi and Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, well, sometimes people around the world have to learn our names in order for us to take this really seriously. And I think maybe that is finally happening here. We've seen some progress over in Flint, Michigan as well, after everybody kind of learned about that. But to be honest, I actually do have a degree of long-term optimism for the problem here. Like I said, the federal government and the Biden administration are taking this problem seriously. We are both seeing additional investment from the federal level and assistance with management of the system. This has always been a two-part problem. One is management and the other is funding. And now that we have the federal government helping out on both fronts, I do have a better long-term outlook on this than I definitely a year ago, that's for sure.
Well, we indeed have our fingers crossed. Looking at that brown water during the video while you were talking is tough to look at. In fact, I know one family took their kids to Honduras because they were so concerned. But we'll come back and talk to you. We'll follow this issue. It's not going away. Toren, very thoughtful, thought-provoking interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.